Admiral Hyun-ki stood before the massive viewing window of the flagship Retribution and watched the stars move slowly past as his fleet traveled through space. The year was 2387, and humanity had grown strong beyond what anyone could have imagined. 300 years ago, what started as a small species on one blue planet had become the most feared force in the galaxy. Every alien race knew the human name, and most of them served under human rule or stayed very quiet on their small worlds far from human space. The bridge was quiet except for the soft sounds of computers and the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Hyun-ki had been an admiral for 20 years and had seen many battles, but today felt different. Today would mark the beginning of something that had been waiting for a very long time. His uniform was clean and pressed, and his face showed no emotion, but inside he felt the old anger starting to burn again. Captain Boram walked up to him carrying a datapad in her hands. She was younger than the admiral, but had earned her place through years of studying alien races and their weaknesses. Her dark hair was tied back in the military style, and her eyes held the same cold look that most humans got when they talked about certain subjects. She stopped next to Hyun-ki and waited for him to turn toward her. "Sir, the final report is ready," she said in a voice that was calm but carried something deeper underneath. "We have confirmed the location of the last Valkyrie settlements and their population numbers. The Galactic Census Bureau has finished their work after 40 years of searching." Hyun-ki took the datapad and looked at the information on the screen. Numbers and star charts filled the display, but what mattered most was written at the top in simple words. The Valkyrie were the last species that had dared to attack human children. They were the final name on a list that had taken humanity 2 centuries to work through. Every other species that had committed crimes against human civilians had already been dealt with in ways that the galaxy would never forget. "How many of them are left?" Hyun-ki asked, though he already knew the answer would not change what came next. "Approximately 8 million individuals scattered across 17 worlds and 43 space stations," Boram replied. "They have been hiding in the Outer Rim territories for the past 60 years since we destroyed their homeworld. Intelligence suggests they know we are still hunting them." Commander Tae-ho approached from the tactical station where he had been working with his staff to prepare battle plans. He was a big man with scars on his hands from the ground wars on Kepler 442, where he had fought against the Zephyrian Rebellion 15 years ago. His face was hard and his voice was rough from years of shouting orders over the noise of battle. He carried himself like someone who had seen too much death but was ready to see more if it served humanity's needs. "Admiral, the final cleansing fleet is ready for deployment," Tae-ho said. "All ships have been equipped with the new plasma bombardment systems, and our ground forces have the latest hunting gear. We can begin operations within 6 hours of your command." The final cleansing fleet was something that most alien species had heard about in whispers but few had ever seen. It was humanity's answer to the question of what happened when an entire species needed to be removed from existence. The fleet consisted of 200 warships designed specifically for the complete destruction of populated worlds. Each ship carried weapons that could crack planets and soldiers trained in the art of making sure nothing survived. Hyun-ki looked back out at the stars and remembered the reports he had read about what the Valkyrie had done to the human colony on Tau Ceti 4. The images were burned into his memory like they were burned into the memory of every human who had seen them. Children taken from their families and used in genetic experiments. Humans treated like laboratory animals by creatures who thought they were superior because they had better technology and longer lives. "Show me the historical files again," he said to Boram. She touched the datapad, and the screen changed to show pictures and documents that were almost 200 years old. The Valkyrie had been a proud species back then, with cities made of living crystal and ships that moved faster than anything humans had built. They controlled a large part of the galaxy and had enslaved or destroyed dozens of other alien races. When they first met humans, they had laughed at the primitive mammals from the small blue world. The records showed how the Valkyrie had attacked human colonies without warning. They had taken prisoners not for information or trade, but for their experiments. Human children were especially valuable to them because young human brains could adapt to Valkyrie technology in ways that adult brains could not. The experiments had been designed to create hybrid creatures that combined human creativity with Valkyrie longevity. "They thought we were weak," Boram said as she scrolled through the images. Their reports called humans an inferior species that would be useful only as test subjects in manual labor. They believed their crystal technology made them untouchable. Tejo made a sound that might have been laughter but held no humor. They learned different when we glassed their first 3 worlds. Too bad for them that humans don't forget, and we don't forgive when it comes to our children. The war against the Velkari had lasted 30 years and had ended with the complete destruction of their civilization. Their crystal cities had been melted into puddles of glass, and their beautiful ships had been turned into debris, floating in space. But some of them had escaped during the final battles and had been hiding ever since. Humanity had spent the following decades hunting down every other species that had committed similar crimes, but the Velkari had been smart enough to stay hidden until now. The other species learned to fear us, Hyun-Ki said. The Thorians serve as our mining slaves. The Keplerians grow our food. The Andromedans build our ships. But the Velkari thought they could hide from us forever. He touched a button on his command chair and the bridge lights changed to red. Throughout the ship, alarms began to sound softly, and crew members moved to their battle stations. This was not a drill or a practice exercise. This was the beginning of the end for an entire species. Send the signal to all ships, Hyun-Ki ordered. Operation Final Justice begins now. We hunt them down to the last individual, and we make sure the galaxy remembers what happens to species that harm human children. The message went out across the fleet, and within minutes 200 warships began changing course toward the outer rim. Each ship carried the most advanced weapons that human science could create, and crews that had trained their entire lives for this moment. They were not just going to fight the Velkari. They were going to erase them from existence so completely that in 50 years most aliens would think they had been a myth. Lieutenant Su-Jin guided her stealth ship through the asteroid field at the edge of the Vega system, and kept her sensors focused on the readings that showed Velkari energy signatures. Her ship was smaller than a fighter, but packed with the most advanced scanning equipment that human engineers could build. She had been flying reconnaissance missions for 8 years and had found hidden alien bases on 40 different worlds. Today she was hunting for something that had been hiding for 60 years. The asteroids around her ship looked normal from the outside, but her sensors told a different story. Several of the larger rocks showed signs of artificial construction hidden deep inside their centers. Power readings indicated that thousands of Velkari were living in carved-out spaces within the asteroids and trying to stay invisible to human detection systems. They had done a good job of hiding, but human technology had improved a lot since they first went into hiding. Base Command, this is Shadow 7, she said into her communication system. I have confirmed Velkari settlement in Grid Reference 44 Alpha. Population estimates suggest approximately 12,000 individuals living in modified asteroid bases. They have basic defensive systems, but nothing that would stop a proper assault. The voice of Admiral Hyun-Ki came back through her headset clear and cold. Understood, Shadow 7. Mark their positions and return to the fleet. Strike teams will be dispatched within the hour. Su-Jin spent another 20 minutes mapping the Velkari hiding places and recording everything her sensors could detect. She could see their ships docked inside the asteroids and their life support systems working to keep the air breathable. These Velkari had been living like rats in the walls for decades and probably thought they were safe. They were about to learn that humans never stopped hunting. Back on the fleet flagship, Sergeant Won-ho was preparing his Special Forces team for another assault mission. His squad consisted of 12 humans who had trained together for 5 years and had experience fighting alien species in their own environments. Each soldier wore armor that could protect them from most alien weapons and carried guns that could punch holes through Velkari crystal barriers. Won-ho had led his team through similar missions on 6 other worlds, and they had never failed to complete their objectives. Listen up, Won-ho told his soldiers as they gathered in the equipment bay. This is the same as always. We go in fast and we finish the job completely. No Velkari gets away and no evidence gets left behind. These are the creatures that used human children for experiments, so nobody needs to feel sorry for them. His team nodded and checked their weapons one more time. They had all seen the historical records and knew what the Velkari had done during the war. Every human soldier was taught about the crimes committed against human colonies, and none of them had any sympathy for alien species that harmed human civilians. The galaxy had learned to fear human anger, but some species had learned too late. Private Kang Su was the youngest member of the team at only 19 years old, but he had already participated in the destruction of 3 alien settlements. He loaded special explosive charges into his pack that were designed to collapse asteroid tunnels and make rescue impossible. His job was to make sure that when the mission was finished, nobody would ever be able to tell that Valkyrie had lived in these asteroids. The assault ships launched from the main fleet and approached the asteroid field with their stealth systems active. Each ship carried 1 special forces team and enough firepower to crack open the asteroids if needed. The Valkyrie detection systems were old and weak compared to human technology, so the ships were able to get close without being discovered. Won Ho watched through his ship's cameras as they approached the largest asteroid. His sensors showed that this rock contained the main Valkyrie command center and probably held their leadership. Taking out the leaders first would make the rest of the operation easier because the remaining Valkyrie would panic without someone to give them orders. Dr. Yejin sat in her laboratory aboard the research ship and studied the evidence that previous assault teams had recovered from other Valkyrie hiding places. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in documenting alien war crimes, and her job was to make sure that human history books would record exactly what had been done to human prisoners. The evidence she had collected would be preserved forever, so that future generations would understand why the Valkyrie had been completely destroyed. The files on her computer contained medical records from Valkyrie experiments that had been performed on human subjects. Children as young as 5 years old had been taken from their families and used to test Valkyrie technology. The aliens had tried to combine human brain tissue with their own crystal-based nervous systems to create hybrid creatures that could control their advanced machines. Most of the experiments had failed, and the human subjects had died in horrible ways. Another batch of evidence from the Proxima settlement, her assistant said as he brought her a container of Valkyrie data crystals. The assault team found these in their medical facility before they destroyed it. Yejin loaded the crystals into her computer and began translating the Valkyrie writing. What she found made her feel sick, but also angry in the cold way that all humans felt when they learned about crimes against their species. The records showed that the Valkyrie had considered humans to be nothing more than useful animals that could be modified and improved for various purposes. One document described a plan to breed human children specifically for use in experiments. Another file contained designs for machines that would use human brains as biological computers. The Valkyrie had not seen humans as intelligent beings with rights and feelings. They had seen them as raw materials to be used and discarded. Make copies of everything, she told her assistant. These records will be sent to every human world and every alien government. The galaxy needs to see what happened to our people and why we will never allow it to happen again. Meanwhile, Won Ho and his team had breached the first asteroid and were moving through tunnels carved from solid rock. The Valkyrie had built their hiding place well, but they had not expected human soldiers to find them. The aliens were tall and thin, with scales that changed color when they were afraid. Most of them tried to run when they saw the human soldiers, but there was nowhere to run in the narrow tunnels. "Secure the command center," Won Ho ordered as his team spread out through the asteroid. "Remember that we need their computers intact so Dr. Yejin can study their files. Everything else can be destroyed." The Valkyrie warriors tried to fight back with their crystal weapons, but human armor was designed to resist their technology. The battle was over in less than 10 minutes, and the asteroid fell silent except for the sound of human boots walking through empty corridors. Kang Su placed his explosive charges at key structural points, while other team members collected Valkyrie computers and data storage devices. Similar operations were taking place at 16 other locations throughout the asteroid field. Human assault teams moved through Valkyrie hiding places like death itself and left nothing behind except empty spaces where aliens used to live. The Valkyrie had spent 60 years believing they were safe, but human patience was longer than alien lifespans. "All teams report mission success," came the message from Fleet Command. "No Valkyrie survivors detected. All evidence has been recovered and all hiding places have been destroyed. Move to the next target system." Su Jin was already flying toward the next star system, where intelligence reports suggested another group of Valkyrie might be hiding. Her sensors were scanning space for any sign of alien activity, and her weapons were ready to mark targets for the assault teams. The hunt would continue until every last Valkyrie in the galaxy had been found and destroyed. The human fleet moved through space like a slow but unstoppable force that consumed everything in its path. Other alien species detected their passage and made sure to stay far away from human ships. Everyone in the galaxy knew what the final cleansing fleet meant, and nobody wanted to give humans any reason to turn their attention toward new targets. Behind them, the Vega system was quiet and empty, where once 12,000 Valkyrie had lived, and worked and hoped they would never be found. Now there was only empty space and floating debris that would eventually be consumed by the gravity of nearby stars. The hunt continued. General Minho stood in the war room of the command ship and studied the holographic display that showed the locations of the remaining Valkyrie settlements. Red dots marked 12 different star systems where the aliens were still hiding, and each dot represented thousands of lives that would soon end. He had been put in charge of implementing the No Mercy Protocol, which was humanity's most complete method of removing an entire species from existence. The protocol was not just about killing every member of the target species. It was about making sure that no trace of their civilization would ever be found again. Their worlds would be changed so completely that future explorers would never guess that intelligent life had once lived there. Their technology would be destroyed or absorbed into human systems. Their culture and history would exist only in human archives as a warning to other species. Status report on the ground operations, Minho said to his staff officers who were gathered around the holographic table. Colonel Unbi stepped forward, carrying a data pad with the latest intelligence reports. She was in charge of psychological warfare, and her job was to make sure that the remaining Valkyrie understood exactly what was going to happen to them. Fear was a useful weapon when it was applied correctly, and humans had become experts at using alien terror to their advantage. "Sir, we have identified the locations of all major Valkyrie population centers," she said. "Our broadcasts have reached every settlement and space station. They know we are coming, and they know that surrender is not an option. Some groups have tried to negotiate, but we have ignored all communication attempts as ordered." The No Mercy Protocol specifically stated that no negotiations would be accepted from the target species. Humanity had learned from previous campaigns that showing mercy only encouraged other aliens to believe they could commit crimes against humans and later bargain for their lives. The Valkyrie would not be given any chance to plead or make deals. They had chosen their fate when they decided to experiment on human children. Major Jin Woo was responsible for coordinating the orbital bombardment systems that would reshape the Valkyrie worlds. He was a quiet man who had studied planetary engineering for 15 years and knew exactly how to use human weapons to change the basic structure of entire planets. His bombardment plans would not just destroy Valkyrie cities, but would alter the geology and climate of their worlds permanently. "The orbital platforms are in position around all target worlds," Jinwoo reported. "We can begin planetary restructuring operations on your command. Estimated time for complete surface sterilization is 6 hours per world. Estimated time for geological reformation is 72 hours per world." Minho nodded and touched the control surface to bring up detailed images of the first target world. Valkyrie Prime 7 was a small planet with purple oceans and silver cities built into the sides of crystal mountains. About 400,000 Valkyrie lived there in underground complexes that they believed would protect them from human weapons. They would learn that human weapons could reach anywhere. "Begin with Valkyrie Prime 7, he ordered. "Full protocol implementation. I want that world to become uninhabitable for any known form of life. Future human colonists will build new cities on ground that contains no trace of previous civilization." The bombardment began with conventional plasma weapons that turned the silver Valkyrie cities into puddles of molten metal. The aliens had built their homes from living crystal that could repair itself and adapt to different environments. But human plasma burned hot enough to break the molecular bonds that held the crystal structures together. Within 2 hours, the beautiful mountain cities were nothing but glowing streams of liquid rock. Colonel Yunbi monitored the communication channels to listen to Valkyrie transmissions as their world died around them. The aliens were sending desperate messages in dozens of languages trying to reach anyone who might help them. Some called out to other alien species asking for rescue ships. Others tried to contact human authorities to beg for mercy or offer surrender. They are transmitting offers to serve as human slaves, she reported. Some groups are offering to give us their most advanced technology in exchange for being allowed to live on reservation worlds. Others are promising to provide information about alien species that might be planning to attack human colonies. Minho listened to the reports, but his expression did not change. The Velkari had been given many opportunities to avoid this fate during the past 2 centuries. They could have surrendered after their first cities were destroyed. They could have turned themselves in to human authorities and accepted punishment for their war crimes. Instead, they had chosen to hide and hope that humans would eventually forget about them. Continue broadcasting our standard response, he told Yunbi. All offers are rejected. No communication will be acknowledged. The debt will be paid in full. The standard response was a simple message that human forces broadcast to all alien species during cleansing operations. It explained that the target species had committed crimes that could not be forgiven, and that complete extinction was the only acceptable outcome. The message also warned other aliens not to interfere with human justice, or they would be added to the target list. Major Jinwoo activated the geological reformation systems, which used focused gravity weapons to move mountains and change the flow of rivers. The purple oceans of Velkari Prime 7 began to boil as underwater weapons heated the water to steam. Continental plates were shifted to create new mountain ranges where Velkari valleys used to exist. Within 12 hours, the planet would have a completely different geography. On the surface, Velkari families tried to escape in their small ships, but human fighters were waiting in orbit to destroy anything that tried to leave the atmosphere. Some alien vessels made it through the initial escape attempts, but long-range sensors tracked them across space, and hunter-killer ships pursued them to whatever hiding places they thought they had found. Dr. Seo Yun was aboard one of the orbital platforms, and her job was to make sure that the bombardment operations were being recorded properly for historical documentation. Every phase of the planetary destruction was being filmed and measured so that future human leaders would have detailed instructions for similar operations. The recordings would also serve as educational materials to teach young humans about the consequences of attacking their species. The crystal formations are responding to thermal bombardment exactly as predicted, she reported to the science team. Velkari biotechnology appears to have no defense against sustained plasma exposure. Organic components of their cities are being completely consumed. The Velkari had been proud of their living cities that could grow and adapt to changing conditions. They had believed that their biotechnology was superior to human machines because it could repair itself and evolve to meet new challenges. But human weapons had been specifically designed to destroy biological systems, and no amount of adaptation could save them from complete molecular disruption. General Min Ho watched the orbital displays as one by one the Velkari population centers went dark. Each red dot on his tactical screen represented thousands of alien lives ending, but he felt no emotion except professional satisfaction at a job being done correctly. The Velkari had sealed their fate 200 years ago when they chose to treat human children as experimental subjects. "Sir, we are receiving transmission from the Galactic Council," his communication officer reported. "They are requesting that we allow neutral observers to witness the final operations, and are asking if we will accept a formal surrender from the remaining Velkari populations." The Galactic Council was a group of alien species that tried to maintain peace and order in civilized space. They had learned not to interfere directly with human military operations, but they still sometimes tried to negotiate on behalf of species that humans had marked for destruction. Their requests were always politely ignored. "Send the standard response," Minho ordered. "Human justice is not subject to alien oversight. No external interference will be tolerated. Any ships that approach our operational areas will be destroyed without warning." By the end of the first day, 3 Velkari worlds had been completely sterilized and reformed. Where alien cities once stood, there were now empty plains of fused glass. Where crystal forests used to grow, there were now lakes of liquid metal that would take centuries to cool. The survivors who had escaped to other worlds could watch the destruction through their long-range sensors and know that the same fate was waiting for them. Colonel Yunbi noticed that Velkari communications were becoming more desperate as they realized that no help was coming from anywhere in the galaxy. Other alien species were staying far away from human operations, and some were even offering to assist with hunting down escaped Velkari in exchange for trading privileges with human colonies. The remaining populations are starting to break down, psychologically, she reported. We are detecting increased instances of panic broadcasts, and evidence suggests that some Velkari groups are fighting among themselves over limited resources and escape ships. This was exactly what the psychological warfare protocols were designed to accomplish. By demonstrating that resistance was hopeless and that no mercy would be shown, humans could break alien morale without having to fight battles on every world. Fear was often more. Admiral Dong Hyun received the intelligence report while his fleet was traveling through the empty space between galaxies, and the information contained in the data files made him stop what he was doing to read every detail carefully. After 18 months of hunting scattered Velkari groups across dozens of star systems, the humans had finally located what appeared to be the last major concentration of the alien species. The target was unlike anything the human forces had encountered during the campaign. Deep in the void between the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies, a rogue planet drifted through empty space with no star to orbit and no light except what came from its own internal heat sources. The planet was completely artificial and had been built by the Velkari as their ultimate hiding place during the final years of the original war 2 centuries ago. Analysis indicates that the fortress planet contains approximately 50,000 Velkari individuals, reported his intelligence officer as she displayed the sensor data on the main tactical screen. This represents roughly 60% of the estimated surviving population of the entire species. The remaining 40% appears to be scattered across remote outposts and individual ships throughout known space. Dong Hyun studied the images that showed a world covered in crystalline structures that formed geometric patterns across its entire surface. The Velkari had turned their artificial planet into a work of art, as well as a military stronghold. Massive towers reached up from the surface like frozen lightning and connected to each other through bridges that seemed to be made of solid light. It was beautiful in the way that many alien technologies were beautiful, but beauty would not save it from human weapons. What about their defensive capabilities? He asked his tactical officer. Commander Hye-won had been analyzing the fortress for 3 days and had identified several systems that could pose threats to the human fleet. She was an expert in boarding operations and assault tactics, who had led successful attacks on 43 different alien strongholds during her career. Her teams were trained to fight in any environment and could adapt to alien technology quickly, enough to turn captured weapons against their former owners. Sir, the fortress is equipped with shield generators powered by the planet's core and quantum cannons that can engage targets at extreme range, she reported. However, the technology appears to be over 200 years old and should be vulnerable to our current generation weapons. More concerning is the fact that they have had decades to prepare defenses specifically designed to counter human tactics. The possibility that the Velkari had spent their hiding years developing anti-human weapons was something that had been considered during the planning stages of the operation. Intelligence reports suggested that the aliens had been working on new technologies that might be able to penetrate human armor or disrupt human communication systems. Whatever they had created would be tested very soon. Captain Jae-sung was in charge of the engineering corps that would handle the final destruction of the fortress planet. His teams had perfected techniques for ensuring that important targets were eliminated in ways that could be seen across multiple star systems. The destruction of the Velkari stronghold would serve as a message to the entire galaxy about the consequences of harming human children. We can configure the planet's core to cascade into a controlled fusion reaction, he explained to the command staff. The explosion will be visible from the nearest star systems and will leave no trace of Velkari technology or biological material. Estimated preparation time is 6 hours once we have secured the surface installations. Dong Hyun approved the engineering plan and ordered the fleet to take positions around the rogue planet. 200 human warships formed a sphere around the Velkari stronghold and activated their most powerful weapon systems. The aliens would be given one opportunity to see the full extent of human military power before the final battle began. The Velkari response came within minutes of the fleet's arrival. A transmission in perfect human language appeared on all communication channels, and the voice that spoke belonged to someone who had clearly studied human culture and psychology for many years. The speaker identified himself as High Commander Veltek and claimed to represent the surviving leadership of the Velkari species. "Humans of the final fleet, we know why you have come to this place," the voice said with what sounded like genuine sadness. "We acknowledge the crimes that our ancestors committed against your people, and we do not dispute your right to seek justice. However, we ask you to consider that those who committed those crimes have been dead for over a century, and that we who remain have spent our lives trying to hide from the consequences of actions we did not take." Commander Hewan listened to the transmission and made notes about the psychological approach the aliens were attempting to use. The Velkari were trying to appeal to human concepts of justice and proportional punishment, but they did not understand that human anger operated on different principles than alien logic. Crimes against human children created debts that could only be paid by entire species. "They are offering to surrender their weapons and submit to human authority," she reported to the Admiral. "They claim to have developed new technologies that could be useful to human civilization and are willing to share all their scientific knowledge in exchange for being allowed to live under human supervision." The offers continued for several hours as the Velkari became increasingly desperate in their attempts to find something that humans might want more than complete revenge. They promised to serve as slaves on human worlds. They offered to help hunt down other alien species that might threaten human expansion. They even suggested that they could be useful as test subjects for human scientific experiments. None of the offers were acknowledged by the human fleet. Admiral Dong-hyun had his orders, and those orders were very clear about what would happen to the last Velkari stronghold. The aliens could make whatever promises they wanted, but the debt they owed could only be paid through complete extinction. Human children who had died in Velkari laboratories 2 centuries ago deserved nothing less than total justice. "Begin preliminary bombardment of the outer defense systems," Dong-hyun ordered. "All ships are authorized to engage targets of opportunity. Marines prepare for boarding operations once the shields are down." The battle began with human plasma cannons testing the strength of Velkari defensive barriers. The aliens had indeed improved their technology during the years they had spent hiding, but human weapons had improved much more dramatically. Within 2 hours, the outer shield generators were destroyed, and human fighters began attacking surface installations. Commander Hae-won led the first boarding teams through breached sections of the crystal walls and found herself in corridors that seemed to be made of living light. The Velkari had built their fortress using biotechnology that responded to the thoughts and emotions of its inhabitants. As the aliens became more frightened, their walls began to pulse with colors that showed their terror and desperation. The fighting inside the fortress was unlike anything the human soldiers had experienced during previous operations. Velkari warriors were waiting in prepared positions and had weapons that seemed to be specifically designed to counter human tactics. Their crystal blasters could penetrate human armor, and their quantum nets could disable human communication equipment. For the first time in the campaign, human casualties began to mount. "They have been preparing for this for decades," Hae-won reported to the fleet command as her teams fought their way through the fortress levels. "Every corridor is designed to channel our attacks into kill zones, and every room contains traps that activate when human DNA is detected. This is not just a hiding place. It is a fortress built specifically to fight us." Private Dalho was part of the assault team that breached the central command complex where the Velkari leadership was making their final stand. The room was filled with aliens wearing elaborate crystal armor and carrying weapons that glowed with internal energy. They fought with the desperation of creatures who knew they were about to die, but they could not match human training and equipment. The battle for the command center lasted 3 hours and ended when the last Velkari warrior fell to human plasma fire. High Commander Velthek was found in the inner sanctum surrounded by the bodies of his advisors and the broken remains of their most advanced computers. He had chosen to destroy the Velkari records rather than let them fall into human hands. Captain Jae-sung and his engineering teams moved through the conquered fortress and began placing the fusion charges that would turn the entire planet into a brief new star. The work was careful and precise because the explosion needed to be visible from the nearest inhabited systems. Other alien species would see the light and understand that humanity's patience had limits. All teams evacuate to minimum safe distance, came the order from Admiral Dong Hyun. Fusion cascade will begin in 30 minutes. Any ship that is not clear of the blast zone will be destroyed. The human fleet withdrew to watch from a distance as the Velkari fortress began its final transformation. Deep inside the planet's core, Emperor Sungmin stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched the final moments of the Velkari fortress as it collapsed into a brilliant point of light that would be visible across 3 sectors of space. The explosion marked the end of a campaign that had lasted 200 years and had consumed the resources of the entire human military machine. Every Velkari world had been sterilized, and every Velkari population center had been reduced to empty space and floating debris. The Emperor was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen the rise of humanity from a single species on one world to the dominant force in the galaxy. He had been born during the final years of the original Velkari War and had grown up hearing stories about what the aliens had done to human children. Now, at the age of 73, he was witnessing the completion of justice that had taken longer than most species lived to achieve. "Your Majesty, the final death count has been confirmed," reported Ambassador Yujin as she approached with the data pad that contained the official records of the campaign. "All known Velkari individuals have been accounted for and eliminated. Total casualties, 8.7 million across 17 worlds and 43 space installations. No survivors detected by any of our sensor networks." Yujin had served as humanity's primary diplomatic representative for 15 years and had been present at dozens of negotiations where alien species had begged for mercy or tried to bargain for their survival. She understood better than most humans how the galaxy had changed during the centuries of human expansion. Fear had replaced respect in most alien interactions with humanity, and terror had become humanity's most effective diplomatic tool. "Prepare the announcement for broadcast across all galactic communication networks," the Emperor ordered. "Make sure every species receives the message clearly and simultaneously. I want no confusion about what has been accomplished here today." The message that went out to every inhabited world in the galaxy was short and simple. It contained no threats and made no demands. It simply stated that the debt owed by the Velkari species had been paid in full and that human justice had been completed. The broadcast included footage of the fortress explosion and population statistics that showed the complete extinction of an entire alien race. Historian Kang Ho was already working on the final entry in the official records that would document the end of the Velkari species for future generations of humans to study. His job was to make sure that the lessons of the campaign would not be forgotten, and that young humans would understand the consequences that awaited any species that harmed human civilians. "The Velkari files will be sealed and stored in the Imperial Archives on Earth," he explained to his research team. "Access will be restricted to senior government officials and military commanders who need to understand how total species elimination campaigns should be conducted. The general population will receive educational materials that focus on the historical crimes that justified the response." The sealed files contained detailed records of every phase of the 2-century campaign, including medical evidence of Velkari, experiments on human subjects, and tactical analyses of the military operations that had destroyed their civilization. Future human leaders would be able to study these records if they ever needed to implement similar justice against other alien species. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the news of Velkari extinction was being received with emotions that ranged from relief to terror depending on the species and their historical relationships with humanity. The Andromedans, who had been building human warships for 50 years, felt secure in their partnership and saw the news as confirmation that humans protected their friends as fiercely as they punished their enemies. The Zephyrians, who had rebelled against human authority 15 years ago, felt cold fear and began making plans to demonstrate their loyalty more convincingly. On the trading world of Kepler 438, an alien merchant named Thex 9 was explaining to his customers why the prices of certain goods would be changing now that the Velkari were gone. His species had been trading with both humans and Velkari for decades, and had tried to stay neutral during the long conflict. Now neutrality was no longer possible, because only one side remained alive. The Valkyrie crystal technology is gone forever, he told the crowd of alien traders who had gathered around his stall. Humans have absorbed what they wanted from Valkyrie science and destroyed the rest. Anyone who has been hoarding Valkyrie artifacts should sell them immediately, because humans will not allow that technology to exist in alien hands. Similar conversations were taking place on thousands of worlds as alien civilizations tried to understand what the complete elimination of the Valkyrie meant for their own futures. Some species began destroying any evidence that they had ever traded with or assisted the extinct aliens. Others started making generous offers to support human colonies in hopes of demonstrating their friendship with the dominant species. Emperor Sung Min received reports from across human space about how other aliens were responding to the news. Most species were being very careful to avoid anything that might be interpreted as criticism of human actions. A few governments had sent formal messages of congratulation for the successful completion of justice. None had expressed sympathy for the extinct Valkyrie. The Galactic Council has requested permission to establish new trade routes through former Valkyrie territory, Yujin reported. They are offering to provide free shipping services to human colonies and are asking if we would like them to establish monitoring stations to watch for any surviving Valkyrie who might have escaped our detection. The offers from other alien species were exactly what human planners had expected. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the complete destruction of an advanced civilization like the Valkyrie had reminded every other species about the consequences of making humans angry. Trade agreements that had been difficult to negotiate for decades were suddenly being offered freely by aliens who wanted to stay on humanity's good side. Accept the trade route proposals, but decline the monitoring services, the Emperor decided. We will handle any remaining Valkyrie ourselves if they exist. Other species should focus on being useful to human expansion rather than trying to involve themselves in human justice. Captain Xianwu was already leading the colonization fleets that would settle former Valkyrie worlds and establish new human outposts throughout their old territory. The planets that had been sterilized and reformed during the campaign were now ready for human settlers who would build cities and farms on ground that contained no trace of previous alien civilization. The first colony ships will arrive at former Valkyrie Prime 7 in 6 months, he reported to the Colonial Administration. Geological surveys indicate that the planetary reformation was successful and the surface is now suitable for human agriculture and industry. We estimate that the world can support 10 million human colonists within 50 years. The colonization of former Valkyrie space was proceeding exactly as planned. Human families who had been waiting for new worlds to settle were eager to claim territory that had been purchased with 2 centuries of military effort. Their children would grow up on worlds where alien cities used to stand and would learn about the Valkyrie only from history books that explained why they no longer existed. Dr. Min Jun was one of the scientists tasked with studying captured Valkyrie technology to determine what might be useful for human purposes. Most alien science was inferior to human engineering, but occasionally something interesting could be found and adapted. The Valkyrie had been more advanced than most species, so their research files might contain valuable information. Their biotechnology shows some promising applications for medical research, he reported to the Imperial Science Council. However, their weapons technology is obsolete compared to current human systems, and their computational methods are inefficient. Overall assessment is that Valkyrie science was impressive for its time, but offers limited benefits to human civilization. This was the typical result when human scientists examined captured alien technology. Most species had focused their research on areas that humans considered primitive or irrelevant. Human science had developed along different lines and had reached levels that most aliens could not even understand. The few useful discoveries were quickly incorporated into human systems, while the rest was discarded or destroyed. On the world of New Terra, a young human girl named Sora was attending her daily education session and learning about galactic history. Her teacher was explaining how humanity had spread from Earth to dominate thousands of worlds and had become the most powerful force in known space. The lesson included information about various alien species and their relationships with human civilization. Teacher, why are there no Valkyrie in the Galactic Zoo? Sora asked when she noticed that the Velkari were mentioned in historical records but not listed among current alien species. Her teacher paused for a moment, and then gave the answer that all human children learned when they asked similar questions, because they made a mistake and humanity does not forgive that kind of mistake. When aliens harm human children, they stop existing. This is how the galaxy works, and this is why other species are careful to treat humans with respect.